today we come to spiritual understanding. And I'd like to start this lesson off with reading a poem that's at the beginning of the lesson. Happy is the man that finds wisdom, and the man that gets understanding. For the gaining of it is better than the gaining of silver, and the profit thereof than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and none of the things you can desire are to be compared unto her. Length of days is in her right hand, in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her, and happy is every one that retains her. With all thy getting, get understanding. And that is from Proverbs 3:13 through 18 and 4:7. Isn't that the truth? Spiritual understanding is high, and we go higher in conscious when we have spiritual understanding. Probably one of the wisest statements ever spoken by a human being was a statement that King Solomon spoke to Jehovah. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart. What a wonderful thing to ask for. And actually, this is exactly what our hearts really desire all the time. Greater and more genuine understanding. I want to read something to you that from this little book, Discover Your God-Given Potential. It says, spiritual understanding enables you to see clearly in all matters, to receive instant answers to questions, and to provide planning and motivation for action by the will. It provides something to stand on and is translated into right decisions that result in right relationships and right conditions in your world. Emily Cady says, understanding is a spiritual birth. And that, I think that's what Jesus was saying when he was saying we need to be born again. We need to be born with spiritual understanding. A revelation of God within the heart of man. Jesus touched the root of this matter when, after having asked the apostles a question that was answered variously, according to the intellectual perception of the men, he asked another question to which Peter gave a reply not based on external reasoning, but on intuition. He said to Peter, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven." You may have an intellectual perception of truth, and that's really where it starts. We have to start with that. You may easily grasp with the mind that the statement that God is a giver of all good gifts, life, health, and love, just as people for centuries have grasped it. Or you may go further and intellectually see that God is not only the giver, but the gift itself, and that he is life, health, and love in us. But unless truth is revealed to you by my Father in heaven, it is of no practical benefit to you. The direct revelation of truth to the consciousness of a person is spiritual understanding. In Unity, we teach the greatest and most genuine type of understanding is spiritual understanding. Spiritual understanding has many definitions, but perhaps the simplest and most accurate definition for our purposes is to have the ability to discern the true meaning of anything. It is a realization of the truth which stands up under all outer appearances and all comings and goings of external events in our world. Today we need a lot of spiritual understanding with everything that's going on in the world. We want to look away from the appearances and know that God is at the center of everything we're dealing with. A person who is expressing spiritual understanding is hardly ever fooled or depressed. I have some more work to do. I think we all do, but it's a process. Or sent into panic by the passing parade of external phenomena. Now, as an idea in the mind of God, understanding begins as an idea of pure knowing. Please notice I use the word knowing and not knowledge. The ability to know comes before knowledge. If a person doesn't have the ability to know, then that which is called knowledge would not exist for him. Before there can be knowledge, there must be a mind which has the ability to know. We need to be open and receptive to spiritual answers. Now, the desire to know is a constant living impulse in man. It never ceases. Have you ever found that the more you know, the more you want to know? And the wiser a person becomes, the more he seeks to share his wisdom with others. Sometimes this could be annoying because we know, and then somebody else tries to tell us, but it's all good. People are coming from the right place. The more meanings one discovers in his life, the more one realizes that are worlds and worlds of undiscovered meanings in store for us. Ooh, goody. A beautiful paradox of truth is this: no person can ever know it all. Well, although some people, I laughed at that when I read it, because some people like to know they know it all, and they like to tell us they know it all. And we say, oh, interesting. Yet all-knowing is part of every person. What this paradox tells us is that we really never have all knowledge, but we each have full ability to know. Knowing is one of our spiritual attributes. And I believe there's a big difference between knowing and believing, because beliefs can change throughout our lives. But knowing, you know that the sun is going to come up in the morning and set in the evening. We know this. We don't believe it. You know, if you ride a bike, that you know how to ride a bike. You don't have to believe that you can ride a bike. You know how to ride a bike. That's what knowing is when you have it. No doubts. It comes as a shock to some people to realize that they actually do have a direct connection with omniscience, or the all-knowing mind of God. Since God is our source and we are from God, of course we have all the attributes that God has. Many persons have believed that their brain is the only mind they have. They believe that the only amount of knowledge retained in their brain cells is what they are able to know. But this is not correct. This is a very limited concept and not true in spirit. Our faculty of understanding operates on many different levels of our mind. It functions on very deep levels of retention, which we call our memory, our subconscious, or even our unconscious. It functions very actively on our current level of conscious awareness. It is on this level where we work with our intellect. This is the level of conscious thinking. This is where we do our seeking of knowledge. Here is where we give our concentration to study, to learning, to practicing of skills, and so forth. Here is where we have our direct connection with more recent memories. And our understanding also functions on higher levels than conscious awareness. I believe consciously on the left side of our brain, unconscious, not unconscious, but subconscious on the right side is where all the spiritual understanding resides. On these higher levels, it uses a higher and finer type of energy than on lower levels. On the higher levels, it functions in ways which have been given names like, and you'll recognize these: prophecy, clairvoyance, mind transference, prodigy, genius, ESP, and intuition. But all these subdivisions only occur in our use of language, not in reality. In reality, our faculty of understanding is one, just as all mind is one. We speak of different kinds of mind and different kinds of functions of the understanding, but in truth, it's all one. One of the most useful of blessings which our faculty of understanding brings to us is called guidance. How many of you have ever felt like you had true guidance from your source? Yes, I believe all of us. And what a wonderful blessing this is. The prayer for illumination brings an increase of light into our understanding. This light is the radiation of spiritual energy and intelligence, or understanding. This light cleanses and clarifies all the workings of our faculty of understanding. Our intuition interprets this pure light and translates it into the language of knowing and feeling for us. Then on our more conscious levels of mind, this feeling and knowing becomes quite specific and relates itself to existing facts in our life. We experience this as guidance. We exclaim with delight, "Oh, now I see. Oh, I see it clearly now." Or, "Oh, yes, I know." I call these moments aha moments. I've had aha moments in my life. Oh my gosh, that's it. That's right. I know it now. And that's when you know it. When you have an aha moment, you don't believe it anymore. You know it. It's deep in you. We follow our guidance and we get good results. We have once again been blessed in all this results because of the right working of our faculty of spiritual understanding. And like I said, I've had these moments, aha moments, especially probably when it came to thinking that I could change my circumstances from outside myself versus knowing that the only way my circumstances in any part of my life are ever going to change is if I change from the inside out. Life is an inside-out job. So nothing on the outside is going to change unless I change on the inside. That was an aha moment for me. I didn't feel like that for a long time. I was always blaming my circumstances. It had to do with me all along. But here I want to read you a really interesting story, and it comes from the Sufi religion, and it's about well-known story about Mullah Nasruddin. He was a colorful character whose practical wisdom is displayed through his very enlightening encounters. Once a famous philosopher was traveling through Nasruddin's village. He invited Nasruddin to join him for dinner. Nasruddin accompanied him to a local restaurant where they asked the waiter about the special of the day. "Fish, fresh fish," replied the waiter. "Bring us two," they answered. A few minutes later, the waiter brought out a large platter with 2 cooked fish on it, one of which was quite a bit smaller than the other. Nasruddin took the larger of the fish and placed it on his plate. The philosopher, giving Nasruddin a look of intense disbelief, proceeded to tell him that what he had done was not only blatantly selfish, but that it violated the principles of almost every known moral and ethical system. Nasruddin listened to the man patiently. When he finished, Nasruddin said, "Well, sir, what would you have done? I, being a conscientious human, would have taken the smaller fish for myself. And here you are," Nasruddin said, and placed the smaller fish on the gentleman's plate. Isn't that good? I love that. Now that's spiritual understanding. Nasruddin had it, but the philosopher did not. One of the things we should never forget is that we have at all times a direct and personal connection with the all-knowing mind of the universe. Our individual connection is called the Christ mind, and the Christ mind is within us. We must learn to accept this, to believe it, and to know it at all times. Such acceptance and such belief will keep us keenly aware of our constant access to all useful knowledge we may ever need. To not accept this, nor know it, will result in self-created blocks to our access to useful knowledge. It's perfectly all right to admit I don't know, but this should always be followed by the affirmation, "But the mind of Christ knows." He knows, and within me connects me with all knowing. Ask for greater light and give thanks for spiritual guidance before you even receive it. And knowledge will come to you just as surely as sunlight follows darkness. The knowledge may come to you from a friend saying something totally out of the blue that, wow, or it may come in a dream. Or you might be watching a TV program and all of a sudden something shouts out at you, wow, that's the answer. Or how about on a billboard? I've known people that get answers from looking up and seeing something that they needed an answer to. Because of the fact that the gathering of intellectual knowledge is not the same as having spiritual understanding, some persons have taken the attitude that acquiring a factual knowledge is not necessary. But now Elsie is big on this, so this is definitely a big point of hers. But acquiring factual knowledge is very much the forerunner of spiritual understanding. You see, a person who has little or no factual knowledge has very little raw material to work with to derive meanings. A person who seeks to sacrifice his intellect for the sake of spiritual understanding must first of all have an intellect that is worth something. An intellect which doesn't contain much knowledge in the first place cannot be an intellect worth very much. Therefore, the so-called sacrifice of such an impoverished intellect really isn't much of a sacrifice at all. This is very much like the teaching of personality and individuality, which you all talked about last week. We teach that the time comes for all true students where they must begin to sacrifice the dominance of personality, which is our higher, truer self, that is our ego self, so that greater individuality, which is our higher self, can come forth, or awareness of your real self. But if the person has not done much to develop his personality, that is, if one has not worked to build a good and worthwhile personality, then what is there to sacrifice? To sacrifice something worthless is not much of anything. So we must have a worthwhile personality to make any sacrifice that's worth any effort. The very same holds true of the intellect and our store of factual knowledge. There are those people who pridefully tell others that they don't read newspapers or watch the news and they don't keep up on current events. And I can tell you I did that for a while. I tried that for a while, but it didn't work very well. They are attempting to create a pure, untarnished mind free of all negativity. They are hoping these actions will open the floodgates of spiritual understanding. I've done this myself, but it really doesn't work, and we must stay informed. If we do not have a good and dependable intellect, if we have not enriched our mind with interesting and factual knowledge, then of what value is any sacrifice of the intellectual knowledge? It becomes a farce. So it is very correct to develop a good and dependable intellect. It is good to go through an educational process in which you have a rich accumulation of worldly knowledge and correct facts. Then you have something worthwhile to spur the growth of greater spiritual understanding. Spiritual understanding gives us the ability to penetrate any mask of personality a person chooses to wear at any given moment. We understand other persons because we have begun to understand ourselves. And that is the only way that we can understand other people, is by understanding ourselves first. We see the meaning of our own existence, and this makes it possible for us to see the meaning of other people's existence. And what is the meaning of any person's existence? It is simply this: God means it for good. Your life is for good, always. Good is the only real meaning for anything. Good is the only true reason for anything. Good is the cause of it all, and good is the purpose of all that is. Now, at times, everything doesn't seem good, but God didn't promise us that everything would be good in our lives. God said that all things work together for good. So in the end, it's all good, because it all works together for good. Anything else is either secondary or it is irrelevant. Only spiritual understanding enables a person to see this. Intellect will not cause a person to argue about it. Intellect will only cause a person to argue about it. Spiritual understanding is simply not concerned with arguments. It is concerned only with meaning and with the truth. And what you'll do is, when you have spiritual understanding, you can be around somebody that is argumentative or wants to be the devil's advocate, and you can listen to it. I remember Elsie telling, she had a friend that did this. You can listen to the whole thing, and you can walk away saying, oh, that's interesting, instead of getting into the drama of an argumentative attitude. Do you want greater understanding, spiritual understanding? Yes. We all do. You can have it. How? Very simply. Since understanding is a divine idea, an increase of it in consciousness can be gained in the way that all divine ideas are increased in consciousness. It is this: use what you already have, give thanks, and ask Spirit to increase your capacity for more. The first thing that will happen to you is that you will immediately begin to have an increased capacity for greater understanding. Give thanks for what you have. That's so important in everything we do in life. Even if it's only a little bit, Give thanks for what you have, and then you will get an increase. It couldn't be otherwise. That is a spiritual law. As your capacity increases, so will the inflow of understanding into your consciousness increase. Your understanding will simply grow. Things that may not have been clear before become crystal clear. Questions that you did not seem to have answers for will suddenly have answers. Decisions which you have once considered difficult to arrive at will become easy. Your knowing will become certain, with no nagging doubts or violent opinions to cloud the issue. You will not have to be right all the time. You will have an open heart, an open mind, and you will want to be kind versus being right all the time. You will find less and less reason to argue or to defend your points of view. You will know that you know, and you will feel what you feel. All of this means that you are alive, well, and growing in spiritual understanding. You will not lose any interest in worldly knowledge or intellectual facts. These things will become even more interesting and useful to you because you will quickly detect the meanings behind them. Outer appearances will no longer have power to deceive you because you will quickly see the truth that always stands under all outer appearances. You will see, feel, and know the truth in all matters. Won't that be wonderful when that happens to the whole world? You will understand the true meaning of your existence and the true meaning of all existence. And that meaning is God means it for good. This is real spiritual understanding. Understanding is an activity that will change not only your way of thinking, but also your way of life. There is a spirit in you that has all the answers. Trust it as you proceed on your spiritual path. Thank you, everybody.